This is Homeschool 101, a collaboration between ABS Television and the Ministry of Education. Stay attentive and attempt all activities. And now, today's lesson.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Homeschool 101. My name is Lorren, Tonge, and the subject that I'm going to be sharing with you today is food, nutrition, and health. Now, there are several aspects or several sections in the syllabus. However, we are going to be focusing on consumerism, and we won't be able to touch all of the aspects of consumerism. However, we're going to look at a few important points. So, when we go to the supermarket, and as you see our setup here, when we go to the supermarket, we have a lot of choices to make. Now, most of the times you hear about consumerism, persons are arguing over a pair of shoes that may have rot or something else. But today we're going to be focusing on the aspect of food and food and nutrition. Now, what is consumerism? It's a word that you've probably heard before, but we're going to look at some definitions. Consumerism, it refers to the theory that spending money and consuming goods is good for the economy. Now, another definition that may be had is consumerism. It also refers to the movement that promotes the interests of the consumer. And we're going to look at who the consumer is very shortly as we look at some terms associated with consumerism. Now, it looks at the interests of the consumer, especially the protection of these consumers from things like fraud and price gouging. Okay, so in the syllabus, one of the things that is mentioned is terms associated with consumerism. And some of these might be familiar to you, some of them might be new. Let's look at it. A consumer. Who is a consumer? You are a consumer, I am a consumer. Anybody who is spending money, you're a consumer. So a consumer doesn't have to be a person who has a physical job. It doesn't have to be a person who maybe has a lot of money in the bank, but the small child who's going to the shop to buy a can of condensed milk, that's a consumer. Okay, you're spending money. The consumer is a person who purchases goods and services for personal use. Now, another term, credit. And that's something that most of us, if not through personal experience, we would be familiar with. It's the ability of a consumer to obtain goods or services before payment based on the trust that payment will be made in the future. So sometimes, and maybe not necessarily with reference to food, but in other avenues, we may make use of credit. Okay? Comparative shopping. Now, this is where our display comes in. What is comparative shopping? The process of comparing products or services to determine the best buy. Now, we have a few items on the table I want for you to pay attention to. I'll just highlight some of them, and as we continue, I'll continue to highlight some. So we have two options here for baking cocoa. Now, some persons are familiar with the Hershey's cocoa brand, and so you might say, well, if I'm gonna bake with cocoa, this is what I'm gonna use. Other persons might say, let me read the back, because they both say the same thing. This one is maybe $8, this one is maybe $20. You then now, as a consumer, compare, am I sure that this is the brand that I want to use? Yes, because I know this brand is associated with quality. Will the Surefine brand give me the same exact thing? You as a consumer, you compare and you decide. Comparative shopping is determining whether we're going to buy Hunt's or a Delmont can. It's also our comparing whether we want a can of beans that's already cooked and all we have to do is rinse it, drain and rinse, or if we're gonna buy the black beans that we have to soak. Now, this can runs you maybe about $8 and change for 15 ounces. Whereas this package, it's 1 pound of peas, and this is in its dried form. So once you rehydrate it, you're gonna obviously get a lot more. However, this is less work, that is more work. Some persons might say, okay, I have to look at comparing the health benefits. Some persons are opposed to canned goods. Some persons say they prefer the peas because they know what they're putting in it. All right, cooperative shopping now. This is the pooling of cash or purchase orders to benefit wholesale or long-term prices. So maybe your mom or your family decides, I'm going to buy something wholesale. So maybe individually, you have to go to the shop and buy 2 cans of milk. You might decide, okay, I'm gonna go to the wholesaler and I'm gonna purchase 2 cases of milk. We pool our funds, purchase the 2 cases of milk and distribute them. The green consumer. We look around today and we know what is happening with the world. The ice is melting, people are talking about greenhouse gas effect and all the rest of it. So a lot of persons are going green. When we look at what Antigua has been doing in terms of reducing our plastic waste, our foam, etc., the green consumer is an individual who aims to protect the environment by selectively purchasing products and services that are considered green. Why? Because they don't affect or endanger the environment. Now, this is done because they figure that this is needed in order to save the planet and to save mankind. They're considered green consumers. Now, bulk shopping, and this is something that most persons might be familiar with. Instead of buying, as I said, 1 can of milk, you might decide I should buy a case or 2 cases because milk is something that I use regularly. So bulk purchasing is a purchase at one time and often at a reduced price of a large quantity of a particular commodity. So if it is that you, for argument's sake, are a family of 6 and milk is a staple or flour is a staple and you use it regularly, it might make more sense to purchase it in a large quantity, okay? Sometimes bulk shopping, and we will look at that later on, sometimes bulk shopping is not necessarily always cheaper. And this is why it's important, as we said, to compare not only prices, but also quantity and quality. Okay, impulse buying. It's the act of buying something that you had not planned to buy because you suddenly want it when you see it. And this is something that I know I am guilty of, and I'm sure many of you are guilty of it. Impulse buying. And the supermarkets, they know, and they prey on our impulses. So we didn't know all the time that we wanted to buy that box of gloves because COVID was a thing. Box of gloves are in front of us now, and we figure, let me throw 2 in my basket. We didn't know that Lysol wipes were going to be extinct. It's in the front of the store, we grab some. Then different items are put strategically. So at one point in time, I walked into a particular supermarket and I saw peas and crackers and other things that were hurricane or disaster preparedness type foods. And those were pushed to us. I didn't plan to buy, but I said, let me pick up 2 just in case because I might need it. I don't want to have to come back for it. That is impulse buying because when in reality, you maybe went into the supermarket to purchase some pasta sauce because that's all you needed. But you ended up going through the aisles and seeing all kind of other things. The pasta sauce meal has now changed to a cream of mushroom, and all of a sudden you're in the aisle that's looking for cream of chicken soup when that wasn't on your list to begin with. And we'll speak about some things that we can do to try and eliminate some of the impulses when we shop. Okay, so rights and responsibility of the consumer. And I'm gonna briefly run through them. What I would say is that in Antigua, we have a very active consumer affair agency, and they do a very good job with education and with educating persons, whether the community, they go to community outreaches, I know they go to schools, and so these are things that persons might be familiar with. Okay, so the consumer, and as you notice, the rights match the responsibilities. The consumer has a right to safety. If you are not safe, how can you consume things? But you also have the responsibility to use products safely. So, as a consumer, you understand how you should open this can. If you decide you're gonna take a knife and do it old school and butcher the can open and you get cut, that's your responsibility. You weren't being safe, okay? Next, the consumer has a right to be informed. So, information, and we're gonna look at labels, information on the labels should be there up front for us to read. So I should know if this can of beans was made in a factory with peanuts. Why? Because it's my right to know. Maybe I have a peanut allergy and so I should stay away from that. Okay, but In being informed, we have the responsibility to use the information. And that is important because a lot of times we're informed, but we don't make use of the information that we have. Okay? You have the right to choose. And conversely, you have the responsibility to choose carefully. So, I can decide I'm not going to buy Pillsbury because it's a name brand and I'm paying an extra $15 or extra $5 for it. And I'm going to buy Continental Chef because it's the same baked good and it's the end result. So I have the right to choose, but maybe in looking at it, the Pillsbury brand would have added some nutrients that maybe Chef Continental didn't add. You have the right to choose. The right to be heard. If it is that you have a grievance, you have the right to speak about it or to address that grievance. You also have the responsibility to express satisfaction or dissatisfaction. How many times do we walk into a store, we see something wrong, we curse about it, we maybe tell our friend, we suck our teeth, and we go back to our car. We have the responsibility to express satisfaction or dissatisfaction. So if we go now to the supermarkets and we realize that there are no hand washing stations and COVID has caused a lot of things to change and our new normal is now different. But you go to an establishment and you realize that there are clusters of persons in the aisle. There are clusters of persons at the checkout. You have the right to express that dissatisfaction, whether it be to customer service or whoever is in authority. You have the right to have avenues of redress, and as I mentioned, our Consumer Affairs Division, they're a very good avenue for seeking that redress. You also have the responsibility to seek redress. Why? Because when you do so, you're now able to rectify a fault that may be affecting someone else. Okay? You have the right to consumer education. You should know what your rights are. And you also have the responsibility to be an educated consumer. That means if there's information, you should be aware of it. You have the right to a healthy environment and also to contribute to a healthy environment. Consumer protection agencies, and we were just speaking about them, that's one of the things that is mentioned in this section of the syllabus. What is the purpose of our consumer protection agencies? Now, these agencies or these organizations, you have both governmental ones or government-enforced organizations, but in other territories you might find organizations that are community-based or customer-based. Now, the consumer organizations, they concern themselves with matters that include, but are not limited to, food and nutrition issues, price control, and customer redress. Examples that we have in Antigua and Barbuda Price and Consumer Affairs Division, and we have the Antigua and Barbuda Bureau of Standards. Now, I made mention of their websites. It's a simple Google search. They have a wealth of information on the standards, on the guidelines, on anything related to this topic. And so it would be good if you could visit their website and make notes or take note of what they have to offer there. Now, Consumer Affairs Division, they focus on redress, they focus on education, rights and responsibilities of the consumer, whereas the Bureau of Standards, they look at creating and maintaining certain standards for your food safety. Okay, so we are speaking about the money that we spend and go into the supermarket. What influences consumer purchasing behavior? What makes us tick? Why do we choose to purchase one brand over the other? Why do we choose to purchase one thing over the other? So some persons, and I've heard persons say, if it's not Hunt's, it's not ketchup. Whereas some persons will swear by another brand of ketchup that may be really sweet. Now this example here, we have Kraft and we have something called Bullseye Everyday. They're both barbecue sauces. Okay, now if you check the back of the barbecue sauce, you might see that both of them contain nearly the exact same material or the same ingredients. Now, what will make us decide that we're going to choose Kraft as a brand over Bullseye Everyday? What will make us decide that? Now, we'll look at several different things. purchasing power. What is purchasing power? Well, the consumer is going to look at their purchasing capacity, as in how much money you have to spend. And then that will then affect their decision whether they're going to buy a name brand such as Smuckers or they're going to purchase Fruitessa. They're both preserves, both having fruits, possibly some added vitamins and sugar, but Smuckers is a known brand. Can I afford to buy Smuckers? Does the Smuckers and the other brand contain the same thing? You now look and say, well, I know that in my shopping list, I have $150 to spend. That is my purchasing capacity. If I have to stretch this $150, it will determine whether I'm able to buy something brand name because I like it, I prefer the taste or whatever, or if I have to stick within the constraints of a particular budget. Okay, personal. At a personal level, consumer behavior is influenced by various shades of like, dislikes, priorities, morals, and values. Put simply, if you don't like something, you're unlikely to buy it. So I know some persons who they don't like tomatoes or they don't like onions, and so they won't purchase things that contain that, or they won't purchase those things to make use of at home. Personal likes and dislikes, that is one of the major things that affects our spending, what we buy. Group influence. Now, when we're speaking about group influences, we're looking at persons like our family members. We're looking at our friends, our neighbors, persons in the community. How is it that these persons affect how we purchase? So maybe 10 or 15 years ago, there was maybe one or two what we call colloquially shawarma shops around. Now, however, they pop up on every other corner, they're in every community, and persons patronize these shops. Why? Because as one person says, okay, I like this, I'm gonna have this, someone else is gonna say, okay, maybe I should try it too. And then one person says, yeah, did you try that one on this road? Or did you try that one on that road? That one is the best. And the person is influenced that way or another way, okay? So our family, our friends, the community or the groups, the persons we interact with, they affect what we purchase. We see things that other persons have, we like it, and we figure, let me try it myself. Okay, economic conditions. Consumer spending decisions are known to be greatly influenced by the economic conditions or situations prevailing in the market. So we realized in the last few months, some persons were left without a job. The economic conditions. And so persons who maybe can't tell when last they had noodles to eat, they're now having noodles with their dinner. Some persons were finding fancy ways to zhuzh up their new noodles instead of having maybe the pasta or the creamy chicken, whatever that they would have had. Maybe now they're getting some other cuts of meat, adding it to their noodles, maybe adding some vegetables. Why? Because it's now critical that you conserve money. Why? You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Okay, marketing campaigns. Marketing campaigns are done on a regular basis and they influence consumer purchasing. I know that I am guilty of seeing commercials with certain foods, and just because of how it was displayed or portrayed on the commercial, I said, let me try it. This looks like something I should have. And so marketing teams in these different companies, they know how to get at us or how to target us, and they're persons who specifically study the consumer in order for you to spend your money. So marketing campaigns, they look at what you like, they look at why you like it, they maybe look at what impacts or what influences you. So you think about family life, when you think about coming together, then you're seeing a recipe with a family having a barbecue and they're only using Kraft barbecue sauce. Why? You think, okay, I'm a family person. When I have my barbecue, this is what I'm gonna use. Now, it's important to note that in the syllabus, all of these categories, they fall under personal, social, cultural, or psychological reasons that, or factors that will affect the purchasing behavior of consumers. Okay, so Now we're looking at types of food shops. We have several types of food shops, and what amazed me during this, and I have to go back to the COVID-19 situation, what amazed me was that prior to this year, teaching this topic, there were some topics that I could only tell my students about. But now you are experiencing them even in Antigua. So we have specialized shops. And these types of shops, they cater to a specific or niche market where persons may be looking for a particular brand of something. Maybe they specialize in meats or cheeses, etc. Then we have supermarkets. We have several of them on island, so we're familiar with that. Then we have open markets. We don't have as many of those on island, but there are a few. One of them that you can think about outside of our local farmers market that we have, there's one on Jonas Road that is open air. You go in, you choose what you like, and you cash out. Okay, then you have door-to-door sellers. Now, this is not necessarily in food, although you see it sometimes in some communities. You have persons who are driving around. You might see a fisherman or hear a fisherman blowing his horn in the community. He's driving around to see if anyone wants to purchase fish. In other areas, you might have other foods being sold in this way. Now, this one, internet and telephone shopping, this was one that we didn't really have any experience with in Antigua. However, because of COVID-19, we see a lot of pop-up businesses where they're saying to you, we will do your groceries for you, just tell us what you want. So you can phone in your list, your shopping list, give them your budget, and they will shop for you. We see supermarkets offering this. I think Gloria's and Cospro at one time was offering this service as well. I don't know if they still offer it. And then we have the small groceries. Now that's a fancy term for what we call colloquially the village shop. We have village shops all around in our communities. Now, in looking at the types of shops, each of these has their own advantages, but they also might have some disadvantages. Now, at the small grocery or the village shop, maybe it's your auntie or your uncle, cousin that run the shop. So you run out of a can of milk, you can go and say, give me the can of milk until I go to town and get the money and come back. You cannot do that at Epicurean. If you don't have it, put it back. If you don't have it, put it back. However, what some persons realize is that at the small groceries, whereas in town or in a larger supermarket, a can of milk might cost $2 and change, at the small supermarkets or the small groceries, it might now cost you $3 or more. Now, granted, they should not be doing this as certain items are controlled by price and consumer affairs, and they have certain prices that are set. However, that is one of the things that is mentioned. At supermarkets, you'll find that you have a wider variety. So whereas in a village shop, if you find a pack of peas, it's a pack of peas. At the supermarkets, you might find a wide variety of peas, beans. You might find packs that have mixed beans, mixed peas, all forms of different options. You might find it in canned form, you might find it dehydrated, frozen, and the list goes on. So you might find greater quantity or different varieties of items. You also have different brands that you might find. Now granted, there are some local or small groceries that are now trying to meet the standards of the larger supermarkets and offer variety and all these things. However, larger supermarkets still attract persons. Why? Because they have a very high or quick turnover of their products, and they also usually are more customer friendly. You have more space, whether to park or just to maneuver in the lines between the aisles. Okay, so those are some of the differences between the shops. Now we're going to look at food labeling, and in looking at food labeling, a lot of persons, they pick up something and they don't know the wealth of information that's found on their label. So we're going to be looking at what we should have or what we should find on our food labels, and also why it's important for us to read food labels. Okay, so what is the purpose of our food labels? Food labels, they provide necessary information to the consumer at the point of sale, which can be used to make informed decisions. When you look at a food label and you realize it says that it has 410 milligrams of sodium. You might decide, this is too much sodium for me to consume. I'm going to make another option. If that information was never there, you would have eaten and not known. Okay? You're able to distinguish between one manufacturer's product from another. So you're able to distinguish between Libby's and Valrico. You're able to distinguish between Kraft and Hunt's. Also, another purpose of food label is that it helps to prevent fraud and provide fair practices in the market. Okay, so what should you find on your food label? And there are several things that we're going to list that all food labels should have. So if you have a business and you're producing food, these things should be on your label. All right, so the common name of the product. Are you selling ketchup? Are you selling cake mix? Are you selling tuna? What are you selling? I should know that based on seeing your label. The brand name or the registered trade name. Is it Kraft? Is it Chef Continental? Is it Duncan Hines? Is it Pillsbury? You should be able to see that as a consumer. Name and identifiable street address of the manufacturer. If you don't know where your product is coming from, should you really be consuming it? Country of origin. Where was this product made? Next, declaration of net weight. And we're going to look at what net weight is in one of our next slides. Declaration of net weight, and this says to you how much or what is the quantity of the item in the can. So this says its net weight is 15.5 ounces. It's important for us to know that because 15.5 ounces might feed 4 persons, and if you have 8 persons to feed, you know you would need to have twice that amount. Okay. Instructions for use, care, and maintenance. It should have directions or instructions on how to whether open, heat, make use of, store, etc. So some items of food you will see, it gives you instructions on how to use it in a microwave, how to use it on a stove top, or how to use it in an oven. Others might say to you, once it's open, please refrigerate. Okay? Then the shelf life. So this is where you will see the expiration date, the best before date, the use by date, etc. A batch code. And a batch code is important because if, for example, I use this box of cake mix and it had a fault, as in it made me sick, I should be able to say this specific box came from this specific batch on this day and it was manufactured then. Possible allergy warnings. With the amount of persons who have different allergic reactions to different things, stating on your label anything that might be an allergy or possible allergens for persons is very important. It can prevent lawsuits, etc. I don't know how many of you have noticed that some time ago, Epicurean would have put up a sign that says that they use peanut oil in their production processes. So it's on the label if you purchase chicken, but it's also a sign that's listed. So if you know you have a very serious peanut allergy, you are then able to say, okay, maybe I should stay clear of the processed food in that section. All right? Terms associated with food labels. The Universal Product Code. And it's important that you know not just these terms, but the ones that were listed before. Why? Because at times a question may come, whether multiple choice or otherwise, where you're asked a question and you have to know what the pull date is, or you have to know what is the quality of assurance date in order to be able to understand or be able to break down the information that's given. Okay, so the Universal Product Code. This is a machine-readable barcode that is composed of different bars, lines, numbers, etc. Most of the time you go to the grocers and you see them scanning this small little item. As they run this through their system, they're able to identify what it is, its price, etc. Pull date. And this is often seen on baked goods or dairy products, especially fresh dairy products, where it's the last recommended sale date of perishable goods. So you might find this on yogurt, you might find this on your breads, etc., pastries, and so forth. Okay? And I should say that it is illegal to tamper with these dates. So whether it's the expiration date or the pull date, once this date would have arrived, it should be removed. It's illegal to sell it, and it's also illegal to tamper. Okay, quality of assurance date. This is the date that the manufacturer says, if you consume this product by this date, it will be at its highest quality. So some persons might say, well, it's not expired, or well, it's still okay because from 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago, nothing should happen to it. However, the quality of what you might be eating is going to deteriorate, or in worst case scenario, you might end up with food poisoning because of the deterioration of the food in the can. Okay, then the nutrition information or facts. This is an important section of your labels, and these are found, all labels should have them. The nutritional facts we're going to look at an example of it in one of our next slides. But this panel or this bit of information is found on the label, and it tells the consumer the nutrients contained in one serving of the product. Sometimes we might take an item, let me see, maybe a can of tuna, and maybe the can of tuna says that it's 2 servings or 3 servings, and per serving it's 130 calories. You consume the entire can and it says 2 servings. You have to multiply those calories by 2, and then you're going to get the amount of calories that you're actually consuming. Also found on these parts or in this section would be things like sodium, the ingredients that are added, any nutrients that might be added, and so forth. And a lot of times, things like sodium, sugar, and fats, they're secretly hiding in our food, and we are not aware. And this is why it's important for us to be educated consumers and for us to also read our food labels. So most persons wouldn't think that a can of tomato sauce contains sugar, but it has concentrated sugar. It also has sodium in it. So sometimes we're at home and we say, you know, I have to fix up this because I'm Caribbean or I'm black and I cook with seasoning and all the rest of it. So we add our seasonings. We maybe say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and put in some seasoned salt, not realizing this already has a lot of sodium in it. So again, it's important for us to read our food labels and our nutrition labels. Okay, content labeling, and we're going to go through these quickly so that we can compare our nutrition facts. Content labeling. This simply is saying to you the list of ingredients that's found in your item. So, let me not use this one. Let me use it. I'll give you this as an example. So, this mentions tomato puree. It mentions water, high fructose corn syrup, and then it says less than 2% of the following. Okay, so you realize that there are several things. It has citric acid and other things in it. What you should note is the main ingredients are listed first. So if when you pick up an item, the first thing that's listed is sugar, or one of the first ingredients or main ingredients listed is sugar or sodium, that is something that should be cause for alarm. Now, it said the first thing is tomato puree. That means that the majority or the largest amount of a particular ingredient in this is tomato. Okay, now enriched. What does that mean? We see enriched or fortified on a lot of our products. We see it on breakfast cereals, we might see it on bread, we might see it on crackers and other different foods, maybe snacks for children and so forth. Now, enriched, what this means is that thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, and by the way, all of these are B vitamins and iron are added to meet some specific legal levels of these nutrients. So in some countries, they realize that persons aren't getting certain nutrients, and so they add it to the foods that they normally eat in order to ensure that persons are consuming these nutrients. Fortified, it means that the ingredients not normally found in the food are added to meet a particular dietary goal. Sometimes we see milk and we see it's fortified with vitamin A and E, or vitamin A and D. They're adding nutrients that they say, okay, maybe you're not going to eat the carrot that might be rich in vitamin A, but you're going to guzzle down this milk, let's put it in the milk to ensure that you're getting it. All right, net weight. Now, net weight is the weight of the contents minus the packaging. So, if this is our package, we have a box, And then we have a plastic container, a plastic inside with the contents. This is not included in the net weight. Only the powder or the cake mix itself is what's included in that net weight. And the opposite of that is gross weight, where it weighs the package and all of that as well. Then in some instances, you might see something called drained weight, where it's telling you, minus the liquid in this can from the peas or the tuna, this is the weight of the actual physical product. Now, a lot of times persons like to say, I'm eating calorie-free, I'm eating low-fat or fat-free, or they might make claims to these things. However, you should be able to read your labels. If a product is professing to be calorie-free, it should have less than 5 calories in it. If it says it's fat-free, it should have less than 0.5 grams of fat and no added fat. So whatever fat might be found in the item, no added fats. Low calories, less than 40 calories. Low fat, less than 3 grams of fat found in the item. And light products, a lot of times we figure that we are eating better, we're doing better when we say we're having something that's light. Light, all it means is that it's 33% fewer calories or 50% less fat than a reference food. So if mayonnaise normally has how many ever grams of fat, when we are talking about light mayonnaise, it still contains fat. However, it contains just a less amount of that. The same thing goes for sodium. It's the sodium content of a low-fat, low-calorie food is reduced by 50%. So if this can had 450 milligrams of sodium in it, a light version of it, or what would be considered low sodium, would have in at least less, half of it. Okay? All right, now we come to an example of a food label. And this was one that I found online. It's yogurt. We're familiar with yogurt. Now, if you notice, you have the brand name, so you're able to easily identify this is Yoplait. We have a local brand, Yao. They also put their label on it. You have La Yogurt. You have so many different brands of varieties of yogurt. Anyway, you have your label, your name of your brand. Then it gives you some information as to what it is. It says to you, you have live cultures. It says it's low-fat yogurt. It says that vitamins A and D are added to it. It also tells you the flavor, and it claims that it's 99% fat-free. Now, onto our nutrition facts, it says serving per container, 1. So in this entire container, let's just assume that this was a container of yogurt and not just the flat label. If you eat the entire thing, you're consuming 170 calories. And of those 170 calories, 15 is from fat. And then as you go down, you see the things that it contains. It contains protein, it contains sodium, a low percent of sodium. Although some persons might figure, what is sodium doing in my yogurt? I mean, it's there, but it's considerably a smaller percent than you'd find in other foods, or maybe something that is outright salty, or you taste it being salty. Okay, and then we come over here, we have our content label with our ingredients, and it lists out cultured, pasteurized, grade A, low-fat milk, sugar, strawberry, etc. And remember, we said that it lists in descending order from the largest to the least. Now, this is just for comparison, and this is what I was mentioning earlier. So you might have some labels or nutrition facts that look like this. And it says 8 servings per container. Now, if it says 8 servings per container, that means that there are 8 2/3 cups in this bag, or in this, whatever this product is that we're looking at here. If you decide you're gonna have it in 2 goes, it means that you're eating 4 servings each time. Let's just say, for argument's sake, you split it in half and you consumed half, okay? And that would mean that you would need to multiply this 230 calories by 4. Sometimes we consume a lot of calories without even realizing that we're doing it, just because, okay, it's a lot of food we eat. Now, some labels, it tells you outright, this is how much per serving, this is how much in the container. So you have an idea of what I'll be having if I have 1 serving, what I'll be having if I have the entire one, okay? It's not a requirement that they add this additional column. However, some companies do, okay? So we're gonna now look at, in a recap, some sample multiple choice questions, and there are only 5, so we're near our end. All right, so we know that we are now faced with the task of completing our exams through multiple choice. Some persons figure this is a very easy feat. Some persons are not concerned. However, multiple choice is something that is a skill, and so therefore we're going to try and answer these questions skillfully. Okay, so the first question says, which of the following are advantages of shopping at a large supermarket? And you have 4 options. 1, the prices are usually low. A high standard of hygiene is maintained. Most products are pre-packed, and a wide variety of products is offered. Now, I could have made that option at D be all of the above, and something that sometimes happens when we're doing multiple choice, once we see all of the above, we automatically think that's the answer, because why would they put all of the above? However, it's not always the case. So, granted, you look at these and you might figure, okay, we have 1, this looks right, that looks right, this looks right, this one I'm not sure. But you have to do a process of elimination, and I'll show you what I mean when we get to the final one. However, the answer is D, which is all of the above in this instance. Okay? Then we get to the next one. One of the functions of a consumer association is to help the consumer A, pay for goods bought, B, choose and prepare meals correctly, C, buy foods that are cheap, D, get value for money. Now, we would love if our consumer association could help us buy food, or help us prepare them, or to buy food that is cheap. However, which is the one that makes most sense? We are getting value for money. How? Because they're going to ensure that consumers are educated. You're going to ensure that the persons who are selling us products, that they are not robbing us, as it were, okay? So they ensure that pricing and quality and quantity is maintained in a balance. All right, next, which of the following is not an aid to wise shopping? And sometimes we don't read these words that are in bold or in caps, or sometimes they're not in caps. But it's important for us to read. Why? Because we might just say, which of the following is an aid to wise shopping? And we go down the list and we say, okay, A. Why? Because that looks like it's a correct answer. However, it's asking us which is not. Okay, so A, shop where there is a fast turnover. B, look out for food that are in season. C, shop at one store always. And D, take a shopping list with you. So, wise shopping, we know when we have a shopping list that is gonna decrease our impulse buying. It's also gonna ensure that we only buy the things that we need. We know that when we shop where there's a fast turnover, it's unlikely that we're going to be purchasing canned goods and other things that are expired or near their expiration date. Fast turnover meaning the things leave, people purchase them, and new stocks are bought. Look out for food that are in season. Wise shopping says use food that's in season. Why? Because it would be cheaper and it's more plentiful, as opposed to when it's in demand. And I'll give you an example of that. Maybe a few months ago, you could have bought an avocado manfully for maybe $8. I went to a store maybe a few weeks ago, and there was an avocado for $15. The same avocado that a few months ago was $8 is now $15. Why? Because it's a scarce commodity. So, what is our only other option? C, shop at one store always. And I know a lot of persons, they go where they figure their money will have value. Some persons, they don't want the hassle of having to go from one supermarket to the next. So they say, I'm here already, I'm gonna pick up everything and go home. However, sometimes, and for us, a lot of our supermarkets are not too far apart, the major supermarkets. There may be a 5 to 10 minute drive at max between them. And you might realize that, and I won't call names because we're not promoting any brands or any supermarket in particular, but you might realize that half of your grocery list you purchase in one supermarket and it's cheaper or more economic, and in the other half you have to get somewhere else. Why? Because, I mean, if at the end you can save $50. Why not? That $50 can either go and be put back into a future grocery list or spent on something else that you need. So the answer would be C, shop at one store always, because that's not always wise. All right, number 4. Which of the following factors is given most consideration when different brands of the same food are sold at the supermarket? Which of the following factors is given most consideration when different brands of the same food are sold at a supermarket? And we have 4 options: buying in bulk, comparative shopping, preparing a shopping list, and D, investigating new products. So here, we're going to do some process of elimination. We know that it's not buying in bulk because we're looking at different brands of the same food. Nowhere in that statement says anything about bulk buying, because as we would have learned, bulk buying is where we're making a one-time shop of a large quantity of items. Then we have comparative shopping. What is comparative shopping? Comparing 2 like or same items that might be of a different brand. So this is where we might be comparing the Hunts and the Del Monte. And I'll tell you that this costs $8 and change, and I was quite surprised this costs $5 and change. And it's the same size, the same quantity, the same exact tomato sauce. Okay? So, comparative shopping. Then we go down the list, preparing a shopping list. How does preparing a shopping list help us with different brands of the same foods? Because most of the time when we write our shopping list, we don't say IGA salt or Kraft whatever. We say cheese, potatoes, salt, pasta, whatever. And when we get to the supermarket, we compare and we look at what makes more sense. And then investigating new products. If we already know that we are going to buy canned peas, us going to look at cream soup is not going to help our cause with the canned peas. So the likely answer is what? B, comparative shopping. So we're looking at 2 different things, and I brought 2 different types of tuna. So we have one versus the other. We're looking at these 2 brands and we're saying which one makes most sense. One might cost $4 and change just because it says Brunswick, or just because it says whatever name brand, and the other might cost $2 and change because it says Valrico. But some person might say, okay, yes, it costs $2 and change, but I really don't like to taste it because it tastes like chipwood. Somebody might say that, not that I'm saying that about the brand, but persons have their personal preferences. Okay, our final question, and this one is one that I think highlights process of elimination the best. Okay, so this says, which of the following must be shown on a package containing processed foods? Then you have 4 options that are given. And persons who write multiple choice like to throw in these questions with options and then give you options of the options. And it's a bit of a throw off, but be focused and look at what the question is asking versus the possible answers versus the options they give you. Okay, so we have list of ingredients, weight, material used for packaging, list of preservatives. Okay, and then we're going down, we have 1, 2, and 3, which is the first 3 options. Then we have 1, 2, and 4, which are list of ingredients, weight, list of preservatives. Then in option 3, we have 1, 3, and 4. Then in option D, we have the last 3. Now, looking at this list, we start ticking off what's correct. List of ingredients, we know that should be on our label, so we know check, that is right. Anything that has 1 in it is an option. Great, so we know D don't have 1 in it, that's already, you eliminate D. Now, even if you weren't sure that you eliminate D, let's move on. The weight, we already focused and said that we should know the weight of our items, so we check that as correct. Material used for packaging, we're not really sure if that must be on the label, but maybe it should be on the label. Let's go down to the next one. List of preservatives. If there are preservatives that I could possibly be allergic to, they should have that listed. So whether they added red dye number 40, whether they added sodium, whether they added a caramel coloring or flavoring, whatever, those must be listed. So we don't have any options for all of the above. That's not there. Let's go back on our list. The one that we weren't sure about was material used for packaging. Now, one thing that all of these foods that we have listed have in common, even though this is in a can, this is in a box, in a plastic, this is in a plastic, a different type of plastic container, all of these packages have one thing in common. In order for them to be passed, or in order for their manufacturers to pass them, they must be food safe. So once your food is in a container, whether can, whether plastic, whatever, you assume it's in a food safe container. So you don't need to see on this label, product is in can, because you can see the product is in a can, right? So material used for packaging is the option that we say, okay, this cannot be right. And then if we had a minus D, saying list of ingredients would have been correct, we look at all the options that contain item 3 in it. Anything that contains item 3 in it, we know it cannot be the right answer because item 3 is wrong. So sometimes multiple choice questions, you see something that looks right and it mixes the right with the wrong. Because 1 and 2 are right, but 3 is not correct. So we look and say, we say A has 3 in it, C has 3 in it, D has 3 in it. So we automatically have to eliminate all of those, and then by process of elimination, the only thing that's left is B, 1, 2, and 4, which are list of ingredients, the weight, and the list of preservatives, which are things that should be on our package containing processed foods. And then we have our references. That brings us to the end of our presentation. I'd really encourage you as students to download the syllabus. If you haven't done it as yet, it would be wise for you to do it. Why? Because as you download the syllabus, you are able to see each section, not just the section that I would have presented on, but you're able to see each section and you are able to identify the things that you have to study, the areas you have to look at in each section, because it's very clearly listed and stated. This section actually has other topics in it, like the purchasing of food and the making of budgets and so forth. But, you know, time constraints. So it would be wise if you would take the time in your personal time to look at these things, and not just for food, nutrition, and health, but most CXC syllabus are found online. Look at them so you can see what you know and what you need to know. Have a good day. Thank you for watching this episode of Homeschool 101.
You've been watching Homeschool 101, a partnership between ABS Television and the Ministry of Education. Thank you for viewing this lesson. Join us again next time.